Number 18. Bunaplata's Pantheon is a perfect example of the success and conquering aspirations, political, economic aspirations, and achievements of the high bourgeois class. That man, Bunaplata, surname, he was called Josep Bunaplata Joseph, was one of the leading icons of the upper class. Barcelona, Catalonia. Bunaplata was the owner of La Maquinista Terrestre y Marítima. That was the name of the company. So the Maquinista machinery of land and sea. Because they were making bridges, they were making pillars for construction for houses, they were making also ships, steam machine ships. When Catalonia and Barcelona was yet a rural country, the iron works of that company, Maquinista Terrestre Marítima, in Barcelona, supplied with iron to shipyards, rail companies, markets, buildings, and industry. Bunaplata and the Maquinista factory were also actors in the main social roles that Catalonia went through the industrialization. The anti-trade union stand and total denial of any labor rights lead to Bunaplata to radical solutions like the lockout. To face the general strikes taking place in Barcelona since 1870, Bunaplata and his fellows of this high class, the employers, did not hesitate to call the army for help in order to stop the working class actions. And actually, he suffered in his own factory because it was this movement, the so-called Ludism, that the workers say the machines will take out our jobs, so they were destroying the machines. And so his factory, his first factory, not this Maquinista, also was suffering some of these attacks and was in fire. The temple, which shows classical lines of these pantheons, is wrapped by a circular fence and rising up a cubic mass crowned by a trapezoid. We can see the symbol of the sun clock with wings, open reference, clear reference to the limited span of time of each of us, how life flies away. Quite high, the monument is crowned by a maid holding a palm leaf in her hand, in winning attitude. She announces resurrection, facing the sea, as if the wise businessman still nowadays would say, there in the port lies the economic wealth of Catalonia. Because actually, despite it was industrial and it is industrial, also the trade has been very helpful for the economy. It's one of his main points in the GDP, the exportation and importation, together recently with the tourism and other sources, so quite a diversified economy. Then here we cover seven Bs. Seven because before we cover seven, but it's from the same family. So here once again, seven Bs, once again Santiago Rossinyol, accompanied by a Clarasol angel. So in the other one was the wife, and here is the man, that very human creature, the angel, holding a plume in the hand, or humanized creature, because it's not really human, the angels holding a plume in the hand, writing eternity, is the last homage from his friend sculptor, Clarasol, to his friend Santiago Rossinyol. Almost yearly, the trio Casas, Rossinyol, and Clarasol exhibit their works in the Sala Parés Art Gallery. The angel, of uncertain sex, has a gorgeous eucalyptus behind. Looking at this tree comes to us some of the ideas that people has about death. The tree's height speaks about ascension, going up, rising to heaven, metaphysical movement, spiral-wise, helicoidal-wise, which is the shape of movement after Gaudí. So the smoke, or even the Atornado, no? They have this helicoidal movement upwards. As the tree loses his skin, that tells us about the expiring condition of everything, how the things change to preserve the essential. Eucalyptus leaves are also useful for their aromaticness, something that always helps to in a walk in a cemetery. See this tomb. It has lost the name of the family. That is the first step of the cemetery board to do not renew the property to the heirs of the deceased. So now we are talking about another tomb. Next step is the following advert stick in the tombstone. This sepulchre has been included in a list of eviction following Article 66 of cemetery laws. If you wish to keep the property address yourself to the officers. Whether by agreement or silence, the funerary properties can return to the cemetery board, which depends from the council, as one can have a car parking, a seat in the theater or in a stadium in the times, and still nowadays to have a space in a graveyard is something valuable. It's an asset, a property. As any market good, a funerary property is liable to be sold. In these cases, when there is a change of property, the artistical work that an artist made for a client 150 years ago is when the piece of art is at more risk because the new owner, if this tomb that normally they are not classified as a piece of art to be protected, so then he said, well, I don't like it, and I make a new one, and this when the new owner destroys the piece of art. So the people that then they bought this plot of land to make these nice horizontal sepulchres. So the niches they are different, but also from a property or buy sell point of view, they were the same. So it's a perpetual property, but every year or every certain time you have to keep paying the lease or the abonnement. And if you keep paying, nobody can take out this property for you from you. So your descendants, a whole lineage, they can use this space for burial. But if the third generation of this family, for example, that also happened, no? And keep branching and branching, and then the descendants, that is not only one, but maybe they are already 20. They say, well, I am not interested anymore, and the other branch of the family also neither. So the grandson normally happen is when they don't want to keep paying and the property returns to the council or the department of the council that handles the cemetery matters that normally now it's externalized to a private company or the public company who used to deal with the cemetery matters, it has been turned into a kind of half public private company. Number 19, Francisco Rivera Chavani. Despite that the real engine of the Catalan industrialization was cotton, by the turn of the century, the Catalan economy was quite diversified. Somehow, the needs of the cotton industry helped to the appearance of other industries. To weave, it was needed wires and steel components. To make steel, it is need iron, and from that, Catalonia didn't have iron. Imported from the Spanish provinces of Cantabria, from the Basque Country, here that iron was treated to make small pieces. So it was built a metallurgy. So in the Basque Country, there were these high furnaces that they were sending the iron to not only to other parts of Spain, but also to England. Very important, this Biscay English connection. It was a very high quality iron from the Basque Country. And there they built a very powerful siderurgy, a part of the Basque band. While here in Catalonia, industrialization was more especially textile, but also was able to build itself a metallurgy industry, as we were seeing with this Maquinista Terrestre Marítima company that we covered before in the previous or two pantheons before. One of the mightiest companies of the time was the one founded by a Frenchman who landed in Catalonia, Riviere Bonneton. Their sons Francisco and Fernando knew how to follow the market needs while calling for protectionist laws as the maintenance of the last Spanish colonies in order to have assured and protected markets in which to put their products. Nowadays, Riviere SA is one of the companies of the group Celsa, which is present in Cerdanyola del Vallès, Cantabria, province in Spain, Wales, Poland, quite an important multinational. Number 20, Josep Maria Ginés sepulchre shows a very rare design, far from the typical lines of the Catalan Modernisme. The carved rose has more in common with the Macintosh style from Glasgow. That is the principle of synthesis or simplification of lines to get to the essential, far from the copying naturalistic lines of the flowers. So here we see a more kind of a square flower or a flower that has been fit into a square, where the other more dominant trend of the Modernisme in Paris or here in Catalonia, there were more curvy lines. So actually Macintosh would be one of the opposites of the more curvy work organics, for example, of Gaudi. But despite radical differences, also between, for example, the Viennois, the Austrian Otto Wagner, or the Hungarian Lechner, or Domenic Montaner, Gaudí here in Catalonia, also very different. Despite all this great diversity of the Art Nouveau, Modernisme, modern style, also they belong to a common movement that we call by these names modern, neo, and so on, the Art Nouveau. And they belong to all this common movement because it was this will to renovate, and they share some common things like, for example, the florality, the love for the representation of flowers with all the symbolism, as also we are seeing here in this video tour with some funerary plants and flowers like the poppy for the eternal sleep. Number 21. De la Riva's Pantheon, decorated both by Joux brothers and Eusebio Arnau, is also one of the greatest and more recently decorated in the cemetery. These artists created a whole zoo of wicked beasts, like the ones of the medieval bestiarium. That also was based in the Physiologus, very important book of the Middle Ages talking about the qualities and attribute and character of different animals and some very invented stories that the people they really believe no in these fantasies. Here, these modernist artists, sculptures were following also a trend present in this movement that was like dipping into fear and mystery. The Romanesque art was making the most of fantastic and fearful monsters to capture the attention of the audience. The many expressionist gargoyles are in dialogue with each other in a tight theater scene. When it came to be decorative, the so-called horror vacui, so horror to the void, was a usual option. The horror vacui, as we were commenting, is right the opposite to nowadays minimalist. It is a temple, the one we are seeing, 21, of a neo-gothic look, and that can be seen even in the typography similar as the one it was used in the Middle Ages. In the buttresses stands up angels of Eusebia now, with a touch of light and immateriality, lightness of flesh, which was the artist's trademark, and a touch of melancholy. This type of roof also, with an eight-sided tower and 4 or 8 figures, is quite common in the neo-Gothic temples. Pantheon number 22. The sculpture work of Nieto's chapel was also made by the Joux brothers. Once again, we are talking about New Gothic or Neo Gothic. The Gothic lines gave prestige and splendor as the people associated that art to a sound religion, the Catholic one. Not by chance, this temple is quite similar to the one next to it. The future afterlife neighbors copied from each other's styles, while also recommended artists and sculptors. And despite there is no artistic plan for the cemetery, so it was a master plan of the paths and this gardening, but it was not a master plan to say, well, all the pantheons they must be this size and they must have these columns and they must have this roof. That was free for the client or the owner of a plot of land to decide how to make his pantheon. But despite this diversity and no before planning, there is also some kind of concentration of styles. Thus, we have a kind of modernist yard, Gothic yard, and so on. Mr. Nieto was partner in the business of Cuma, Siuro y Cross, a cotton factory in South, at the banks of the river Ter. That river, together with the Llobregat and Cardener, was one of the main axes of the Catalan industrialization. The cotton businesses went through different crises as the cotton hunger. Thus, it was called a crisis because the cotton hunger, because it didn't arrive. Consequence of the loss of the colonies, which led to difficulties of cotton import and also to the War of Secession of the United States that for some months so it stopped the trade, no, the export of cotton from south of USA. In the last decades of the 20th century, as the dinosaurs, most of the textile companies and these cotton mills disappeared. Nowadays, the industrial factories, which show the birth of the revolution ideas of the working class, are reconverted in public facilities for the enjoyment of culture. But sadly, some other cotton mills, because it's very costly, and sometimes they don't know how to give a rentability to the big space, so are quite in a bad shape, waiting for a proper restoration and a rentable use.